So Borderlands has pretty much come to every other platform except for a Nintendo one until recently. Gearbox Studios and 2K have decided to bring Borderlands Legendary Collection to the Nintendo Switch, which means that we've got, we got Borderlands 1, 2, and the pre-sequel. So basically Borderlands 1 Ultimate Edition, Borderlands 2 Ultimate Edition, and Borderlands pre-sequel, its Ultimate Expanded Deluxe Edition with everything in it, have now been brought to the Nintendo Switch, and you can play portably, which is not the first time you can play Borderlands portably, because you could do that on the PlayStation Vita, although it didn't run that great on the Vita, but nonetheless you had the option to be able to do that. And then you've also can play it docked, and it runs a hell of a lot better portably than it did on the Vita. So anyway, getting ahead of myself. So guys, today we're going to be doing a review for Borderlands, the Legendary Collection, Borderlands Legendary Collection, BLC, for the Nintendo Switch. And we're going to talk about the ups and downs, everything that's included with it, whether or not you should pick it up, and whether or not I think it's, something you need or not. So we're going to go into all that. And I want to give a special thank you and shout out to 2K for sending it over to me to be able to review. And with that being said, I'm Mikhail Casanova, Hawaii content creator, host of Hawaii's #1 podcast, Casanova Podcast. And I stream every single week on twitch.tv/Mikhail Casanova. So catch me over there if you didn't know. That's why I've been streaming the last couple of months. Twitch.tv/Mikhail Casanova. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into this review of Borderlands Legendary Collection. Roll the intro. The story of Borderlands games revolves around several vault hunters on the planet Pandora that are looking for a vault, literally looking for a vault. Both Borderlands 1 and 2 take place on Pandora, with Borderlands 2 focusing on your fight to survive and rise up against series antagonist Handsome Jack. The pre-sequel is just as its name implies, by being a sequel to the first game and a prequel to the second game, where you are on the moon of Pandora seeking out a vault and learning more about Handsome Jack and learn how he becomes the tyrant that he is in Borderlands 2. The stories are rather fun and enjoyable, and are ones I suggest you get into yourself, and that's just about all I'm going to cover here. We're going to switch over to gameplay. So when it comes to the collection of games, they're all looter shooters, meaning that it's all about you killing enemies to gain new weapons and equipment and level up to progress through the games on your own or with friends in co-op, either locally or online, along with being in the typical RPG faction, where your attacks do a set amount of damage, and based on your level and the type of weapons that you're using, along with certain areas that you hit, will end up doing either more damage or critical damage, such as headshots or on some enemies and the like. The collection gets you 3 classics, with Borderlands Game of the Year Edition, Borderlands 2 Game of the Year Edition, and finally Borderlands the pre-sequel Ultimate Edition. In Borderlands Game of the Year Edition, the game doesn't have as much focus on the narrative as it does being an open world sandbox with shoot and loot mechanics being the main draw. So if you're expecting the story to take you on a trip, then you'll be disappointed. The Game of the Year Edition gives you all the DLC for the game and all the enhancements that were included in the release of the game from the 2018 re-release on other modern consoles. While you have a lot to explore in Borderlands 1, the downside is you're stuck to one area and ultimately feel like you're on a large fetch quest that never feels like it ends, on top of massive difficulty spikes and a nagging need to grind to level up constantly. If you can get past this and just want a game with some good, albeit poorly executed ideas at times, and fun classes and gameplay, then Borderlands Game of the Year is worth jumping into to see the chances of the franchise. The best entry here is none other than Borderlands 2 Game of the Year, as that game, honestly, this game has aged like fine wine, with not only how graphically well it holds up, but due to the art style, but also in how the story unfolds, with the game being fully voice acted and the gameplay being stepped up tremendously. Borderlands 2 has a better sense of exploration and an open world environment, where the game has you feeling like you're on an always progressing forwards quest, and rarely does it ever have you feel like you're stuck in the monotony of like the first game did with its back and forth nature of fetch quests. There's so much more customization for your loadouts, class upgrades, and more. You get all the DLC that comes from 2 with the exception of the DLC that connects to the 3, which I'm guessing when Borderlands 3, hopefully if that comes out to the Switch, it'll include that, fingers crossed. The final game in the collection here is Borderlands the Pre-Sequel, which takes everything that was done in 1 and 2, removes the bulk of the issues with both of those games, and takes it to a new level, focusing even more on the narrative to build up more of the background of Handsome Jack and the lead up into Borderlands 2. The game introduced low-gravity environments, oxygen tanks, freeze-based weapons, and more, all while taking the established formula from 2 and tweaking it a bit. All expansions released for the game originally have been included in the Ultimate Edition. What's cool is a feature added to this version exclusively is that you can turn on gyro aiming, which work really well and adds a new layer of depth to the fun combat system. The last thing to bring up is that, it's one that's always been a franchise, is that you can do split screen local co-op, allowing you and friends to get into this wonderful set of games together. And thankfully on the Switch, it doesn't stress the console, resulting in split screen co-op. So there's like no dips in performances, or at least I haven't experienced it myself. Now, graphically, the games all look phenomenal and just as good as they do on other consoles, with the exception of the PS4 Pro, Xbox One X, and Steam editions, which run at resolutions higher than 1080p. In the Switch version, it's capped at about 30 frames per second, both portably and docked, and generally, I think that the reality of 2K having the game in cel shaded art style has allowed this game to continue to look amazing, a decade after majority of these games have been released. While I did have some worries of the games looking worse because of them being ported to the Nintendo Switch, given how a lot of games being ported do not look good often, and especially with how bad the PlayStation Vita version was done, it's safe to say that all that was put to rest, as 2K definitely took their time to port this game over in a great way, and it has little to no hiccups. Now you might be curious when it comes to the audio, and honestly this collection has its series mascot Claptrap delivering some of the most witty and funny and just insane lines, but also has one of the greatest villains in gaming, being Handsome Jack, who's so well voiced that his threats and taunts just feel and sound amazing. Environments, enemies, NPCs, and more all sound solid and appropriate, and the game's humor has been, which I think is really funny. I still find a lot of the shit to be incredibly hilarious, but it's heavily criticized by many reviewers of this era because, I don't know, people are sensitive for some reason. Things are funny before, which, I can understand. Some things do need to be like, oh, okay, that's not funny anymore, but stuff like this is always going to be funny, and people now are just sensitive to everything. It's, well, I'm all in my fifis, but whatever. It's heavily criticized. I still find it to be amazing because it's edgelord. It's the internet forum style that's always just been funny. Now, when it comes to the downside, so what's the downside of this collection? They came to the Switch years, and I'm talking about years after the original re-releases on other platforms, for one. And, that's something that's been an ongoing issue when it comes to games coming to the Nintendo Switch, is a lot of games will come 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or more years later, and they're at a higher price, which is weird. I don't understand why it's doing that. And then the second would be the file size. If you decide to get this collection digitally, you're going to have to rely on internal storage of the Switch, and then that's going to eat up all your storage. The Pre-Sequel alone, or Borderlands 1 and 2 combined. A lot of people may not like the idea of another last-gen port coming to the Switch, yet I have to ask those of you who complain about that, where were your complaints when the same game collection was released on other platforms? Just a thought. Now, here's the verdict. The Borderlands Legendary Collection offers you hundreds of hours of content with the core games and their full DLC sets, so honestly, how can you go wrong with this collection? This is not only the first foray of the franchise on the Nintendo Switch, but also one of the most robust and feature-packed gaming experiences you'll ever have. If you have a Nintendo Switch and you like looter shooters, then this is a game that you need in your collection. All right, and that's it. That's the review for Borderlands Legendary Collection for Nintendo Switch. I'm excited that it's finally on the platform. I'm just hoping, fingers crossed, that we get Borderlands 3. And one of the things too is, like, not only from 2K Studios do we have Borderlands, but we also have BioShock, which another amazing franchise that I'm glad it's on the Switch, because that's another one I really love, that franchise. But you know, nonetheless, having Borderlands is really great. Now you've got a game that you can play co-op with a bunch of friends, and you know, all the content's there, except for one that ties 2 into 3. But nonetheless, you got the entire, you know, original 3 games on the Switch. So that's always awesome. And again, thank you to 2K for sending me the review code to be able to cover this. I'm really excited, and I'm really grateful. And what do you guys think? Do you have this for your Switch, or do you have it for another platform? Whatever your thoughts are, let's get the conversation going down below. And make sure you follow me on social medias. Links, as you can see, is telling you where I am on everything. And other than that, catch me on Twitch, twitch.tv/MikhailCasanova. I primarily stream Final Fantasy 14. But other than that, I hope to see you over there. So, that being said, deuces wild, too sweet, be the elite. I'll see you on the next one. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Congratulations. And since you made it here, why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Like the video if you enjoyed it. And you can always check out MikhailCasanova.com. If you want to support the content, we've got Patreon, as well as channel memberships and super chats. And with that being said, this is Mikhail Casanova. I enjoy you guys. I hope you have a great one. Mahalo, and see you next time.